Alright folks, welcome back to the Don's channel. I am the Don Father and I've came across this video here yesterday, I think. And the title actually appealed to me because I thought this could be quite interesting. Excuse me a second. It's playing away to itself. This could be quite interesting because it's not a part of history that I know anything about. It's from the Infographics channel. If you like their stuff, subscribe to their channel. That's the advice I can give you on that one. The link to the original video, as always, will be in the description section below, and if anybody would like a personalised video request and shout out, check out our Patreon account, which will be there also. We've also got our Veterans Battle Still Rages merch getting sold, and the money from that is going to veterans struggling with PTSD and other combat stress related issues. So please check that out, and if you can afford to purchase anything, that would be fantastic. And that's it. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share, and put the bell on. Anyway, why Japanese soldiers became Texans, I have no idea why, so no more talking. Let's go!
World War II was raging, and on the European front, a group of heroic American soldiers had found themselves in a dangerous fix, cut off from supplies, surrounded by the enemies, and facing certain doom. Their only hope was a miracle, and a miracle would come in the form of some unlikely saviors. This is the story of the Lost Battalion and the unique bond formed in their salvation. They say everything's bigger in Texas, and the 141st Infantry Regiment was hoping that that was true. Also known as the 1st Texas Infantry, this military unit traced its origins back to the Texas Revolution, and when they were called into action in World War II, they were ready to fight. Assigned to the 36th Division, they were sent to clear a ridge in the Vosges mountain range in occupied France. But this would be anything but a routine mission. Major General John Dahlquist was advised against the mission by his officers, but chose to commit the unit anyway, something that backfired terribly. The Germans had swept into the area with superior forces, and the US command gave their order to withdraw. But while the flanking units received the order and retreated, the 141st never received it. They were left behind enemy lines, encircled, and with quickly dwindling supplies. US command tried to drop supplies, and the rest of the 141st Regiment made 2 rescue attempts, but the Lost Battalion remained stranded with the conditions quickly deteriorating. But half a world away, an unlikely hope was coming. For Japanese Americans in the United States, World War II brought its own unique hardships. As soon as Pearl Harbor was bombed by Imperial Japan, the immigrants and first-generation Americans known as Nisei, who made up the community, found themselves viewed as strangers in their own land. They faced harassment, suspicion, and even violence from Americans who viewed them as potential spies and secretly loyal to a country many of them had never set foot in. But
well, at this point, that is so understandable. Pearl Harbor's happened. You would not trust them for a start. It's basically been the reason why you've committed your country to the war, the Second World War that was. It's because of the Japanese. And if you see these people who are Japanese but never set foot there, you would be suspicious of them. You'd probably be quite angry because lots of people have lost their lives, and also more people are being sent to go and fight in a war and lose their lives, and that is because of what the Japanese did at Pearl Harbor. So there would be anger there would be suspicion there, and it would be quite a worrying time if you were these people who had been living in the United States, and since that happened you would be like, oh no, you know, it would be a really anxious time to be living there.
with the stroke of a pen, their situation was about to get much worse. President Franklin Roosevelt signed the controversial Executive Order 9066, which created military camps where anyone with Japanese heritage would be contained for the duration of the war. While this was limited in Hawaii, the U.S. territory where the majority of U.S. Japanese population lived, on the West Coast, over 110,000 Japanese Americans were taken from their homes, forced to abandon or sell their property, and imprisoned in internment camps far from home. While the initial order was not specific about how far-reaching it was, Colonel Carl Bendetson, in charge of the program, expanded it to anyone who had even distant Japanese heritage. And no one locked up in these camps knew when they would be released. But there was one way out. The majority of Japanese Americans were patriotic citizens, and many of the young men couldn't abide being locked up on the home front when there was a war being fought. They wanted to join the war effort, and a year after the internment, they got their chance. The government organized a segregated unit of Japanese Americans named the 442nd Infantry Regiment. Many left left families behind in the internment camps, hoping they could help bring the war to a close and the internment camps with it. They would later be joined by the 100th Infantry Battalion, composed mostly of former members of Hawaii's Army National Guard. They were a small and controversial group, and they were about to go down in history. From the moment the war broke out, these Japanese-American soldiers were treated as potential security threats. The Hawaii National Guard, already enlisted, were classified as enemy aliens and not allowed to carry their weapons when sent to training. At training camps, their commanding officers were taught to test not just the Japanese-American recruits' skill, but their loyalty as well. But at every turn, these young recruits passed the test and impressed their commanding officers. It was on to war. Because the U.S. command didn't trust soldiers of Japanese ancestry to fight in the Pacific theater, they were sent to Europe and first fought on the African front. They would later be sent to Italy, where they were able to cut off German soldiers and drive them north. It was a tense and brutal series of battles, and the 442nd and 100th suffered heavy casualties. Many felt they were being used as cannon fodder by their commanding officers, but they acquitted themselves heroically, leading many to nickname them the Purple Heart Brigade. But their greatest test was still ahead. The 442nd was transferred out of the Italian front and placed with an anti-tank company to prepare for the invasion of southern France. This led to heavy fighting in the Vosges Mountains and a constant battle of back and forth with the German troops. This was a challenging period where they had barely any rest and continued to take heavy casualties from German counterattacks. At one point, there were 9 days of constant fighting, but it was just beginning. New orders were coming in. It had been nearly a week since the Lost Battalion had been in contact with any other Allied soldiers, and they were barely holding out. It was October 27, 1944, and the 442nd and 100th units had only 2 days rest since their last battle, but they were now being called in for the most critical mission yet. They would be sent in to rescue the stranded battalion, with backup from 2 field artillery units. But the Lost Battalion was surrounded by considerable forces of General Wilhelm Richter, one of Hitler's most feared commanders. This would be the most brutal fight of the war for this brave group of Japanese-American soldiers. The American soldiers had to breach a powerful line that had encircled the 141st, and they would have to fight on multiple fronts. Making it worse, the elements seemed to be conspiring against them. The area was foggy during the day and unusually dark at night, making it hard to see what was in front of their eyes. The men often had to hang on to each other in a chain just to move forward. Heavy rain and snow wore them down. Many soldiers came down with trench foot. Things were no less dire for the heroes of Texas. The conditions had deteriorated for the stranded soldiers, but they weren't giving up. They dug deep into muddy soil and created makeshift disguises for themselves with tree limbs. This would make it harder for the Germans to see them and give them some rudimentary protection from the constant barrage of artillery and shattering trees. Rations had long since run out, and the soldiers were barely able to survive off rainwater and occasional lucky drops of supplies that got through the fog and the German barrage, and their plight had become a major issue on both sides of the war. Hitler had since become aware of the stranded Texans, and believing that killing them would demoralize the Americans, he ordered they be captured or killed at all costs, setting up a brutal final stand. But he didn't account for the motto of the 442nd and the 100ths, go for broke. It was time for a final stand. The battle to save the Lost Battalion would be the most brutal of the war for both groups. The Texans had already taken heavy losses, losing 20% of their forces before they were rescued. The 442nd unit lost a full third of their 3,000 men, with 800 injured and a full 200 killed in action. But when the 141st met the 442nd, they immediately recognized fellow American soldiers and shared a cigarette before getting back to the war. The Nisei soldiers were starting to get the recognition they deserved, but the war was far from over. There would be many intense battles ahead, both in France and Italy. They would continue to fight bravely despite their dwindling numbers, culminating in a last stand at the Gothic Line. It was the last days of the war in Europe, and they fought against an increasingly desperate German war machine. But time and again, they forced the Germans to retreat and cut off their escape routes. The Nisei soldiers had gained a reputation for their fearless nature and devastating charge, and managed to make several sneak attacks on German forces. As the war reached its close, the German forces began surrendering one unit after another, and on May 2nd, the 442nd and the 100th got to celebrate victory in Europe, but not without a heavy cost. The losses these two units suffered along the way was shocking, and led many to feel like they had been used as cannon fodder. General John Dahlquist, the commanding officer in charge of the unit's strategy, once asked the entire unit to present itself for an award. When he saw the small numbers, he became angry and thought they were ignoring him, only to be told these were the only men who had not been injured or killed. The Nisei soldiers had fought heroically and paid terribly, but when they returned to the United States, they would finally receive their due. President Harry Truman, who replaced the late Roosevelt, saluted the Nisei soldiers upon their return from Europe. He cited not only their heroic actions in combat, but the fact that they did it while facing the great prejudice from their own countrymen. And over the years, the 442nd would become the most highly decorated in American history. Not only did they receive more Purple Hearts than any other unit their size, but over the war, they would receive 5,200 Bronze Bronze Stars, 558 Silver Stars, and a stunning 21 Congressional Medals of Honor, the highest award for valor in combat. Many of the unit would go on to extended careers in politics or the military, with one, Daniel Inouye, going on to be a long-serving senator from Hawaii after losing his arm in the Italian theater. But there was one place where their heroism was held in higher regard than anywhere else. Texans have long memories, and the citizens of America's largest state at the time followed the story of the Lost Battalion with great fear. Not only were their citizens trapped on that French battlefield, but many of them were the sons and husbands of the people of Texas. This was personal, and when word got out that they would be returning home safely, Texans wanted to do something to thank the people most responsible. It would be a while, but one man had a unique idea. John Connolly was no stranger to the horrors of World War II, serving in the United States Navy and earning a Bronze Star himself. He was a lieutenant commander by the time he was released, and went on to serve as Secretary of the Navy before returning home to Texas in 1961. But now he had another job in his sights, Governor of Texas. The proud veteran won, and almost immediately after taking office decided to honor some deserving heroes. Creating honorary Texans is a popular trick of Texas governors, and the list is a long one. Iconic action stars John Wayne, Chuck Norris, and Arnold Schwarzenegger have all received the honor, as has Bob Dylan. Rick Perry named most of his favorite politicians and pundits as honorary Texans, including Rush Limbaugh. But no governor created more Texans with the stroke of a pen than John Connolly when he made every single member of the 442nd Infantry Regiment and the 100th Infantry Battalion honorary Texans. An overdue thanks from a grateful state to a group of soldiers who gave their all in America's greatest conflict, at a time when many of the fellow citizens saw them as enemies. For another unlikely hero of the European front, check out Titanic officer who became a hero of 2 world wars, or watch this video instead.
Wow, that was inspiring. Absolutely incredible. The knee-size soldiers then, it just shows you what it meant to them. Of course, understandably, Americans would be suspicious of them, some cases probably angry with them, because of what the Japanese had done. But with that, I think that could possibly have been the sort of driving force behind them to prove themselves that they were American and they were patriotic and they loved the country. And obviously, even in training, they constantly had to sort of prove themselves. People didn't trust them. Even when they were in training, they didn't trust them. They had to prove that they were trustworthy, as well as fit to be soldiers and fight in the European front. And they did both. They did both with great determination and desire to do it. And look what they achieved. It was incredible. What a story. I'm blown away at just how well they did. They've managed to get through it, and obviously their acts of valour to this day, I don't know if that's true to this day. That was only 2 days old, that video. I think that's been made, or released, sorry. The most decorated unit in the history of American military, did they say. The amount of Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, all the different awards, the Congressional Medal of Honors, and no state more grateful for them than Texas, because obviously word had got back to Texas as their stranded unit, hungry, injured, a lot of them killed behind the enemy lines for ages, no water, drinking rainwater, no food, ran out of rations, and these Nisei warriors, soldiers, have come to rescue them and get them out of there. And of course Hitler, he was determined to kill them as like a morale booster to his own troops, and to demoralise the Americans, who were hoping that they could get these brave Texas soldiers back home where they belonged. He wanted to kill them at all cost, and he never managed to do that, and that was thanks to them. Incredible story. I love that. I love the fact that they've turned what would have been a really difficult time for them into, and like, do you know what? They probably understood why American people felt that way towards them, but they used that as their fuel, their fighting fuel, to show everyone that they weren't just American, they were more than that. They were very, very proud of being American people. Obviously, these ones hadn't even set foot in Japan. They had more in connection with the United States ideals than they did the Japanese ones. So, I think they proved that more in battle. More than enough with the amount of casualties and men that they lost there. So wow, what a story, that blew me away. I hope you've enjoyed that, by the way. It wasn't one I was familiar with. I do think I can remember those sort of camps being set up in San Francisco there. I think I remember that story, but in terms of what they did in France and Italy, etc., I don't know if I've heard that before. So that, I really, really enjoyed that story. I hope you have as well. The link to the original video from Infographics is in the description section below. Check out their channel, doing loads of different stuff there. You might like some of their stuff, so do check it out. And check out all of our other stuff that I mentioned at the start of the video as well in the description section below. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share, and put the bell on. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. I am the Dawn Father, and I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.